that's our preview for you. In case you haven't seen the movie yet.
That's pretty much the whole soundtrack, and you just keep on playing that on repeat, and
you're good. It's scary.
Yeah, just get a harpsichord and throw it down a flight of stairs while playing a violin you don't know how to play.
Hi, I'm Ryan Wright.
And I'm Jerry.
And I'm Thomas.
Welcome to Reasons to See,
where we give you reasons to see.
And not to see.
Insidious Chapter 2. I don't want to hang out. Reason to See number 1. Patrick Wilson.
Does not get naked in this movie.
No, he does not get naked.
Very angry.
That son of a bitch.
He
You
almost
asshole.
got naked in the first one.
He almost got naked in the first one. He was in his underwear. I was like, okay, I can settle for that. But no. Because if you guys don't know, Patrick Wilson, he's always shirtless. Or naked.
And he looks good, too.
Yeah, he does look
real good.
He should be. That was the one thing missing from his performance in this film. His almost Jack Nicholson from The Shining performance in this film. No, Patrick Wilson's awesome in this movie. Like, he's totally different than the first one. Technically plays two people in this film. He's good at carrying on and continuing the character we saw from the first one, and this new character is terrifying at times, just absolutely scary, and his performance is awesome.
You come back to him and you're not sure if he's okay because of the events of the first film, and then he's really good at giving you a sense that something is off over, long periods of time. And then when he finally gets to go nuts, he commits hard to that.
Well, if you think about it, like, the first one really is about him. Like, it's kind of deceitful in a way, because in a smart way, because it's like they make it seem like it's about the boy, but really the story is strongly about Patrick Wilson's character, and that's why Chapter 2 continues it with mainly being the struggle in like, not internally, but I don't know, spiritually.
In the spirit, it's the struggle between the spirit world and the corporeal world. And fighting.
I love how, because we saw the double feature that they were, in case you guys didn't know, there was a double feature. You missed out if you didn't see it, sorry. I remember watching that moment where Patrick Wilson's like, I'm not afraid of you. He's talking to the scary old lady. I'm not afraid of you, I'm not afraid of you. And I'm like, yeah, character growth, here we go. And then he gets fucked over by trying to confront his fear.
So never confront your fears, right? Take anything from this.
It was totally reminding me a lot of like Jack Nicholson's descent in The Shining.
There's a lot of scary movies that have that, where the bad thing happens to the father figure in the movie, like Amityville Horror. If you take the strong person out of the family and turn them against the family, it's a little scarier, because
it's brilliant.
Women can't do anything.
Yeah, women are weak.
Yeah, so
women are puny.
Yeah, and then the kids, what the hell are they gonna?
Yeah, who saves the day all the time? It's usually a guy.
It's the man.
It's a guy.
Testosterone.
Can women, fly in their dreams? No, but men can.
I'm just gonna point out that Elise was pretty instrumental in the first movie, and if she hadn't come by,
but did she
no one would have been saved.
Did she save the day?
Kinda.
I believe it was Patrick Wilson who saved the day.
She supplied them with all the tools to save the day.
She gave him knowledge of powers he already had.
That's true.
Yeah, that she took away and chose to give back.
Yeah, because she's a bitch. But Patrick Wilson is a hero.
When you look at him for a lot of this movie, you don't think you're watching Josh anymore. Even though he looks like the same guy, he feels like a different character because of, what's happening inside of his body.
What I liked about his performance a lot was you could tell he was having a lot of fun at the same time.
Yeah,
it's always great to see an actor have a lot of fun, especially like someone who's usually so serious, because when you watch the double feature, it's actually, I thought, made the experience better, because this movie literally is just a continuation. I remember watching Patrick Wilson and I was like, he's a really serious guy. And then in this one, even though he plays like the villain, he's a lot of fun to watch, because you could tell he's having a good time.
Well, and that's the thing is he really gets a lot of stuff to do in both of these movies, because in the first movie he takes a role that's usually a bum role. Haunted house movies are sort of famous for having the stupid dad character, and that movie avoids that, and he helps to sell that. And then in this movie he gets to go nuts. So they've really given him, over these two films, a lot of cool things to do and to work with.
Despite how you feel about it, you can't take for granted the fact that for a sequel they were really attempting to be different and not to replicate.
Yeah, it was definitely way different. but we'll get into that.
We'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into
definitely
that.
get into that.
We'll get
later.
into
Yeah,
that.
things are gonna get real insidious in here.
I don't think
That's not how that
That's
word works.
when in Rome.
I think that's a giant wooden ship the Vikings used to use.
I don't think the network is going to be upset about the lack of an old wooden ship.
Leave diversity.
Let's talk about Anchorman. Right?
Reason to see number 2. It finishes the story.
What I like about this is it's a real continuation of the first one. It picks up from where it left off. It's just cool to see like they're taking all the same characters and just continuing what we saw. It just feels like an extended. That's what, you know what I mean? It feels like an extended 90 minutes or something like that.
A lot of scary movie sequels, they kind of try and do the prequels and all that stuff, or they try and do a whole different family. This one, it kind of, like you said, it added to it. You get to see, because I mean, the movie could have just ended right there. They didn't even need to make a sequel. It's scary because it ends like that and you don't know what's going to happen.
Especially with this particular horror subgenre. It's like the haunted house movie sequel is a hard thing to do because a lot of times you get, oh, you know, the family's being haunted again, but the house is different. You know, we have different set pieces.
Yeah, definitely.
This movie, it seems like they really took the time and effort to be like, okay, how can we make this sequel work and be different without doing any. They didn't really have any retroactive continuity. You know, they didn't have to change the first movie to make the second movie work, and that's, you know, big respect to them for that.
You know, like when James Wan, I was reading an interview with him, and what he said was he was trying to go for like a domestic thriller. And when I was watching this movie, that's like the total vibe that I got. It doesn't feel like haunted house anymore. It does feel like domestic thriller with ghosts. A lot like The Shining. So yeah, and it's cool to see them change it up like that. You know, for some people it's definitely not going to work, and for some people they might really like it.
Well, I think even in the first one they were trying to stray away from the more haunted house, and they even explained it's the child who's supposedly haunted because all the spirits want to get into his body. So that's why even they moved, because remember we heard that he was trying to stay away from that cliche of they always stay in the house, like
they always stay in the house.
Yeah.
You know, dad doesn't believe, and all these things like that.
Yeah, so when they moved in the first one, that's when, and stuff still happened, that's when you're like, okay, this is a little different than all the other haunted house movies I've seen.
They really got outside the box with this, and this is a movie where theoretically you could have just, rested on your laurels and just been like, we're going to collect a paycheck. They could have easily, because the first one made so much money and it was such a hit, they could have just been like, whatever, as long as we bring people back, people are going to watch it anyway. But it seems like they really took the time and effort to go, how could this story advance from what we've seen? What can we get creative with? And the whole new story with the old woman ghost from the first movie, tying that in essentially kind of does what Saw 2 did with Jigsaw. It's like you see this sort of villainous character we only see a couple times in the first movie, then you take that character and you flesh them out in a way that's completely scary for a whole different reason.
Yeah, it feels like that this was parts of the first one that they didn't have time to fit in or something like that,
Yeah, it's like
it's not like they just compiled deleted scenes. It's like, no, this is the completion of the original story. Like, it ties in way too well. It doesn't seem like the tie-ins were like, makes a lot more sense. Not, that's a clever trick you did,
So the tie-ins were pretty cool. It's because we got to see the double feature, so we got to kind of see the different tie-ins that, if we saw the movie 2 years ago or whenever it came out, that we probably might not have caught. But like when he was knocking on the door, I really like that because they had the scenes from the first movie showing everything that happened, and you don't really think about it. You're just like, oh, it's it's just ghosts. They're in the house and everything. But then when they tie into it, so showing that he was a part of the first movie in his astral projection form, I thought that was really cool.
There are moments they touch on in the second movie that work in the first movie because you don't know much about them. They're mysterious. They wrap those moments around, kind of like, with the whole parallel timeline thing. They wrap them around in ways that are really clever, and some of them are scary for different reasons. So it works for two different stories. It's like you have the mystery of the first one, then you have the whoa of the second one.
Yeah, the first one has more of does have much more of a mystery horror feel, and this one has like a sort of a much more supernatural feel about it, you know, because you're really in the other world a lot of the time, you know.
Yeah.
Because you're only in the other world in the finale of the first one, and in this one, you're like you get it. They cut back and forth a lot, and then you got side stories going on with Speck and Tucker, and was it Carlito?
Yeah.
Oh, Carl.
Carlito's way is also in this one.
When they take the idea of the further and they even expand upon that, they explore it in different ways, you know, with, like she says in the first movie, it's a distant realm, but it's also all around us, so it's got that weird time crunched in on itself.
Parallel
you know,
universe kind of thing.
So,
yeah. And I really appreciated that this sequel, you pretty much had to watch the first one, because they didn't really
to watch
yeah, because a lot of sequels nowadays, they're kind of like, oh, let's just do a whole new story, you know, if we need to explain something, we'll do it. They didn't really explain anything in the second one. It's either you've seen the first one and you know it, or you're completely lost and you just hopped in on the second one.
You know, like calling this chapter 2 is like the best thing to call it. You know, it does feel like, oh yeah, this is a chapter 2. It does not a part 2 or some like Insidious with a clever title afterwards.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, a different adventure featuring the Lambert family. It's like, this is the next step of this story. The movie moves differently because we already know these people and we already know their situation, so it kind of dives right into stuff.
It's pretty fast paced,
Yeah, it's pretty fast paced.
Reasons to see number 3, cinematography.
James Wan likes to, you know, really incorporate tracking shots, and he does them so clever. Like
there are a lot of zooms.
I'm talking specifically about those shots when people are like walking around the house and you just fall in, like, oh, there's a ghost in the fucking corner.
Those are great.
I love those shots.
Well, yeah, and he has a definite visual style, and this one is a little lighter on some of the really crazy, like, you know, the first movie opens with the upside down, and then we're floating through here. They follow the lines of the banister, but he's really good in all of these, especially these ghost movies. He's really good at framing things creatively and where to hide and sort of have scares come from and have shadows and light and stuff like that.
It did have that kind of scare factor where not everybody catches it right away. Some people in the theater are like, and then everyone's like, oh, and then you see it the last second, you're like, okay, holy crap. Like they would show the kind of like a figure for about a split second, kind of like nobody realizes it's there, and then they throw everything at you like, okay, we can see it now.
At certain points I almost got a sort of giallo, like Italian vibe with they used a lot of colored lights, like there's especially some prominent like red lights for the expressionistic stuff.
Reason to see number 4, the effects. Said it for The Conjuring, and I'll say it for this movie. The effects are terrifying a lot of the time.
Parker Crane.
The mother, she was terrifying, and just all the dead people are fucking scary, and the makeup on Patrick Wilson, fantastic.
Yeah, there's a whole scene. I mean, progressively over the movie, he starts to look shittier and shittier because of, you know, certain story details, and they do a good job of gradually making him that way. And then there's a scene where his face is actually like withering and he's old, and it's very convincing makeup, and I know that old age makeup's hard to do. All the further ghosts, like, I know some people think it's cheesy, but I personally love that sort of weird, almost China doll approach to the makeup of the further ghosts, you know. They're all sort of made up in an exaggerated, almost glamorous sort of way, with the rosy cheeks and the pale complexion, the rosy cheeks, the exaggerated eyes, you know, the lipstick. You know, it's got a definite, almost funhouse sort of thing to it, and I really appreciate it because it is jarring in a completely different way than, you know, rotting corpses are.
And to touch on the mother again, it's kind of hard to make a horror film where you don't just get scared from the things that pop out. It's like the creepy factor is much higher in this one because there's a scene where you see the mother, it's about the whole backstory, and she's talking to her son and everything, and then she realizes that the ghost, or Patrick Wilson's character, is in the further, and then she looks at him. You see the whole face and the makeup and her facial expression. Scared the shit out of me.
And like they're little like her eyes start to like change and
then she comes at him like that's hard to do. That's really hard. Instead of like the little like, oh, let's go, oh my god, you know. Can you imagine her giving you a blowjob? Shit, I could.
Thanks for forcing me to now imagine that.
Don't put it in my mouth.
Reason to see number 5, Steve Coulter.
Not Colbert, Coulter. Let's get it straight.
This is not an episode of the Daily Show, like you said.
It's about the same thing. Yeah. This guy was really cool. It's kind of introduced a new kind of like paranormal investigator kind of thing to it. So he, but it was cool because you could tell he was afraid.
Yeah.
too.
So it makes it scary because when you're with, like when Elise is there, it's like we're fine. Elise is here. So, but
Yeah, she's very warm.
Yeah.
He does. That's a good point. He has a very good contrast to her.
There's like more trauma in this guy. He's more.
Yeah.
He's. It's like he seems more like he's drawn to this even when he shouldn't be.
When he's first introduced, you kind of get this like kind of weird feel from him, like that he's afraid, and that makes you even more afraid because he tells Elise, he's like, "Oh, I'm scared."
Yeah, and that's what's so cool. That's another sort of clever thing I thought they brought into this is that they introduce him as our new sort of authority on the spiritual world and stuff like that. And whereas Elise has a very warm, comforting presence, he, like you said, seems a little bit more naturally scared of these things. But the essence of his character comes out of the fact that he is still willing to push through that.
Yeah.
And you see that struggle go through.
And you like root for the guy at the same time,
Definitely.
He's a good actor too. He has a lot of moments where he has to be like scared but cover it up, but you can feel the fear.
Oh,
but
yeah.
But at the same
he
time,
portrays
it's
that
like
really well.
because that's hard to do. Like you got to show the audience that you are scared, yes, but you also can't see like, dude, you look scared. The
Gotta be
other
strong.
guy's gonna know,
Yeah, the whole cast is a really strong part of this movie, and he's one of the few new, prominent characters, and he is a welcome addition.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't feel like he was just thrown in there. I felt like he was like an essential part of the story, and he played this part really well. Reasons to see number 6, the music.
What I will say is like a lot of horror movies when they have music, a lot of times it's like, okay, it's silent, there's tension, and then there's a jump scare, and then they play music, and then the music kind of calms it down for me, to be honest. But in this movie, when the music starts playing, you get way more scared.
Yeah.
It's scary ass music.
Well, I found myself really freaked out when the music started. I'm like, oh god, here we go again. Like, getting really anxious, and the music stops, and that's when you're like kind of realizing that something's gonna jump out or something. But it didn't really happen like that all the time. The music will stop, and then she'll like go around, and then the music will kind of start up again, and then boom, it'll freaking hit you with whatever they're gonna throw out. And it, I didn't appreciate that because that scared the shit out of me.
Yeah, fuckers.
Yeah, and I'm not going to see a scary movie to get the shit scared out of me. Actually, I don't know why I'm going to see. Why did you fucking take me there?
I don't know. I wanted to see you shit.
Anyway.
Insidious. Did I use it right?
No,
You're getting closer.
Oh, you're getting closer. You
Yeah.
are getting closer.
I still don't quite know what it means.
By the
But part of what I dig so much about both of these movies is that all the parts are unique to these two movies, and the music is no different. The music has a personality that is of the Insidious world, and they carry that over into this movie, and it is very gothic and shrill and discordant, and the music is over the top, but in an awesome way because it's so queasy, and again, going back to that funhouse vibe, it is like it's not subtle in the best way.
Well, I think the music was probably the main thing that set the tone throughout the whole movie.
Just the title card of Insidious.
Yeah.
That
Oh,
right,
man.
it's terrifying. Just
Yeah.
the title card. The title card is scary.
And you know what's coming, because if you see the first one, you're like, oh, okay, that got me. You're not going to get me. Oh, fuck, you got me again.
Yeah.
All right, you sons of bitches.
Reasons not to see. Some weak writing.
I think some's an understatement.
I think you're a son of a bitch.
Well done. That was good.
Yeah, I thought the writing in this wasn't as strong. It like, there's just some things I thought were kind of stupid. Like in the end, when they're like, when the kid's like, Mom, I could save him. Just if I fall asleep, I can save him. The kid just sleeps all of a sudden. Like I was like, what kid's just gonna go into hibernation mode out of nowhere?
I wouldn't actually necessarily pin that on the script and its execution so much as like, we don't have time for this, just get him to sleep. Like, that seems like
Just
more
hit
of
him,
an,
knock him out,
it is implausible, but this movie is much more over the top. I feel like that's more of an editorial choice though. It's like, we can't have
Yeah.
him sitting there for 20 minutes. Like,
I didn't like how they incorporated the detective. Like they start off the movie with this detective. He kind of just vanishes from the movie.
Yeah. And then he calls back, he's like, oh, it's not your husband's finger marks.
But we're still
we're watching.
Yeah.
Who the fuck lets a suspected murderer out of jail? You hold him in jail. You don't, let's go back to my family. No. See, if they kept him in fucking jail, there wouldn't be a movie. Alright, and we would have been fine. I wouldn't have gotten the shit scared out of me.
This is the thing. I feel like the first movie is really tight. I'm like, this is a really tight movie. It breathes just right. The second movie, to me, I think they do some great story stuff. There's some awesome twists. There's some awesome, really out of left field ideas they bring in. The story is great. I feel like just as a whole, the script is just rougher around the edges than the first movie. And it feels like if they had just gotten a little more time to smooth out that script, it would have been a better film overall.
But then one can also say like how it's a little rough kind of adds to the chaoticness in a way.
Yeah.
So in a way it sort of is a good addition. You know, like the script still doesn't feel like it maybe it's not the most polished, but there's something about it that does feel spontaneous. There's something about the script that does still feel fresh. So I wanted to say some weak writing. Not the writing in general, just some of it.
There was a good amount of scenes where I caught myself just laughing just at how kind of cliche it was and overused.
What?
Yeah, like okay, when they were like, oh, we gotta go to Our Lady Angel or whatever the hospital was. Yeah, let's go to an abandoned fucking hospital where every other scary movie is set. You know,
I guess that's a fair criticism, but I feel like there are so many other things this movie does that are not cliche.
Yeah, but it's just
like there are always going to be a few.
Yeah, when Josh was knocking down the door, you know, The Shining. That's what came to my mind first.
Amityville Horror.
Yeah, Amityville Horror also. You know, it kind of distracted me. It kind of brought me out of the movie, out of the film, because I started just laughing like, oh wow, like he's gonna stick his head through and say, here's Johnny. You know, it's just, it kind of pissed me off. And what really threw me out was that stupid voiceover in the beginning. I just wanted to make sure I pointed that out. That thing pissed me off. That just threw off the whole groove of the movie for me, because they do kind of like a prequel thing, and then they introduce Elise, and she has the same voice. It's a different actress.
They loop Lin Shaye's voice over a younger actress.
And it was just really, really shittily done. I'm making up for it.
With a movie like this, a lot of times I'll go into a movie and I'll be like, that was kind of choppy, you know. I'm interested to see how I'll feel on a second pass, because not all the time, but a lot of the time if I see a movie that seems a little like, oh, this is kind of a mess at the beginning, a lot of times it's not as much so on a couple other passes when you can sort of pick out all the small details. So I'm just interested to see how it'll play a second time. But
yeah, me too. I thought all the writing sucked.
Split decision number 1. Fun scares.
I like cheap scares. Fun's sugarcoating it.
So he doesn't like that.
It was a cheap horror scare, alright?
I like
cheap horror.
The movie.
I liked them.
Well, since I don't like it, I'll begin. I hate fucking cheap scares. First person camera shooting, and then it steps on something like, oh, everyone freaks out, and it's just a little doll on the ground. Somebody's putting stuff away, and you know, it's getting a little tense, and then someone runs up like, hey! And it scares you.
That moment though, just for this specific movie, the way that moment played out, I almost feel like that was a self-conscious joke. Because I get the sense that like this movie has a gleefulness to it. It's a lot more over the top than the first movie, like they crank it up to 11.
First movie, the reason I liked it so much is there weren't cheap scares.
There was a lot of jump scares.
Yeah, there were jump scares, but they're creepy as shit. The reason I don't like cheap scares, it doesn't stick with you. You go home and you're like, oh, you know, someone just, you know, came up behind him and touched him, like, oh, that's not scary.
But I feel like there's only a few cheap scares. I feel like for the most part, there's some really good scares. I jumped a good amount of times like in this movie.
I jumped too, but because of the cheap scares. Like, I remember seeing you jump one time.
I jumped at the horror of having a cheap scare.
Yeah.
There are certain cheap, those read to me more as like cheeky, like we're fucking with you, because it has, like I said, it has that sort of, you know, carnival vibe to its proceedings. And also, I mean, part of the scariness of this movie for me is just the fact that there are certain things they bring in that are just unsettling and weird. It's like you have this weird mother gender confusion thing, which was really kind of jarring to look at, and you have, you know, James Wan is really good at coming up with these things that are just creepy conceptually and then creepy to look at. There are some cheap jump scares, but some of the scariest things about this movie are just in its concepts and ideas.
No, yeah, there was some good, like, scary, creepy parts that weren't jump scares, where it gave me chills. Like we were talking about earlier, the mother, the makeup, when she completely turned, that scared the crap out of me.
Oh, and the mother, right before she slapped Rose Byrne, that whole moment I was just frozen.
Yeah.
Like, just watching that whole thing, I was so scared.
See, that's a good scare. That's creepy.
So that's
and
like, when's she gonna explode?
Yeah,
you know?
Like, and then also there was another part when, what was the kid's name?
Dalton.
Dalton. Yeah. when he has the can and he's talking to somebody, and then this person kind of like runs out, and she looks screwed up.
Oh, scary when all the ghosts start piling on.
Yeah, no, but even before that, like she's kind of in the corner,
Yeah.
like shaking, and like you can tell something's just wrong, and that really scares the crap out of you. And then the ghosts come out. That was a good one. That wasn't a cheap hooker scare, right? That was a legitimate, you know, high class prostitute scare.
The thing with this movie is that they change up the genre of it, because you're right in a sense that it doesn't feel like a horror film as much. It feels more of a thriller. Yeah, this one does feel more like a thriller.
Yeah.
But there is but that's where I get your point though at the same time, where there's scares into the concept of itself.
Split decision number 2. Specks and Tucker. Tucker is like a fat person name.
It's a fat baby. We're calling him Tucker. There was something about the way they used them in this film where I appreciated it, because like that you hang out with them a lot more. You kind of get your little side adventure with Tucker and Specks on their little adventure with Carl. At the same time, I thought there was a little too much comedy, because that especially came from them.
Comedy. The thing I liked about the first one, I'm going back to the first one, is they had them in it, and they were the comical relief. They were, because this movie's so stressful, you're freaking out the whole time. They could say something that might not even be that funny, but you're like, oh my god, these guys are awesome! Oh, please don't scare me again! Oh, these guys are funny! In this one, I felt they just tried to make them more and more funny, and it just wasn't working, and it kind of threw off the whole vibe of the movie, because it made it a lot less stressful, and they weren't even that funny. I mean, they had some good parts.
Yeah, because it's kind of turned into like a funny paranormal investigator type of story with them.
This is another element. I wonder if it'll play better the second time around, because it seems like the vibe they're going for is much more over the top and much more gleeful in this sense. And, you know, the reason Tucker and Specks work so well in the first movie is because the humor comes from who they are as characters. They're almost like brothers. They're always having to one-up each other. They don't have funny dialogue. It's all from the humor of the situation that this paranormal shit is going down, but Tucker still has to pull out a bigger flashlight than Specks does. And in the second movie, they don't play on that as much as they do give them just more funny dialogue.
Yeah.
I'll admit right now, I'm just biased in general. I love Tucker and Specks, so I really enjoyed having them on screen in this movie. But, you know, to put the critic hat on, at least on a first impression, they don't work quite as seamlessly with the story, quite as well, because it's not comedy that's coming out of the essence of the characters so much as it is they're making jokes.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed them still, but I thought it calmed the mood down a little too much.
They're colorful, you know, side characters in the first movie, and in this movie, I really dig that they gave them at least a storyline to drive and to be instrumental in, and I think they are important to the stories.
Split decision number 3, Rose Byrne. I think she's beautiful. Gosh, I like her.
What did I say yesterday? She looks like an old lady trapped in a young woman's body. She just has some weird look to her.
I'd still bang the old lady.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, but she has a pulse.
She is not as crucial to the storyline as she is in the first movie, but she still turns in a bang-on performance. Like, she is really good, and part of what I appreciate about both these movies is that, you know, Rose Byrne has been in a lot of things, and it would be easy to glam people up, and I really believe her as just a mom of 2 kids with a husband who's going nuts, you know? When shit is hitting the fan, you really believe that this is really traumatizing to her life. You know, she can cry over hauntings like no other.
There's something about her though that felt kind of like she was missing from the film. Like when I look back on this film, like she doesn't do a bad job at all in my opinion. I think she does a great job with the scene she has. When I look back on her, I feel like she's barely in it for some reason.
Well, I think for
she's
this
not
one,
yet.
Yeah, they didn't really need her as much to set up the story, because in the first one they needed her to, you know, experience all this stuff.
Because the first one's about a couple and the kids, and now you got like the grandma way more involved. And
she didn't go down easy trying to scramble with Patrick Wilson there when things got rough.
Yeah, I love rough sex.
That's not the version I saw.
Rough sex with Rose Byrne. All right. Ryan's consensus: a solid horror movie sequel is the reason to see Insidious Chapter 2. A solid horror movie sequel is the reason to see Insidious Chapter 2. You see, I think a lot of people are either going to take what you see here as an homage or a cliche. And it's really up to you how you feel. Yeah, I liked how they changed it up. I liked how they just really continued the story and completed it. It's cool to see a sequel where they're not just trying to get a franchise out of it, but complete the story they wanted to tell.
Jerry's consensus. Funhouse chills are the reason to see Insidious Chapter 2. Funhouse chills are the reason to see Insidious Chapter 2. Yeah, man, I mean, it's a bit rougher around the edges in the first movie, but they bring in a lot of really cool and really unsettling ideas, and they got really original with how to approach doing a sequel to a movie, and it feels necessary. Everybody does a great job with it, so... more episodes of Reasons to See, because you can't stop at just one.
Yeah, once you watch all of our episodes, why don't you go ahead and follow us on Twitter. We'll follow you back if we want to. And like us on Facebook, and we'll like you for liking us.
Just in general, we'll just like you as a person.
Agree to disagree.
Or just a screen name, that too.
And at the end of all that stuff, you're going to want to get updated every time a new review or video is out. So,
subscribe. Click on them dicks. That's right, he's got 2 of them apparently. Due to my awesome
that
grammar.
would be a very strange twist.
That is insidious. Huh?
Yeah, we'll say that you got that one right.
All right, I did it.
We don't have a dictionary on set, so that sounded good to me.
It did not sound.
No.
It sounded. The second one was better than this.
It's 2 against 1.
When I'm watching the first one again, when she was like, "It's insidious," I was like, "Oh, she said it high."
Yeah, me too. It looks scary too. Have you ever tried to spell it? That's scary.
I want to see a movie where Patrick Wilson is half naked and Rose Byrne is half naked.
Well, now if you had to choose, one would have to be topless, and the other one would have to be bottomless. So it's kind of like a...
I would say Patrick Wilson is bottomless, and Rose Byrne is topless.
No, see, I would go the other way.